Kakalosh Boker Tov. We're going to be continuing Bezrat Hashem with the 2 dots on Kuf Lamed Bet Amud Bet. So we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines down. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. So we learned in a Braita. So the last part, if you remember, we kept on trying to say what was more Chamur. And we were trying to learn what was more Chamur, whether it was the Avodah, whether it was the Milah, whether it was Tzarat, whether it was all these different things. And now we're going to start the following. We're talking about the Mitzvot Milah is doche, the isur of cutting off of the tzarat, which means we know that if a person gets leprosy, they're not allowed to cut off their leprosy, right? Because what does it help? They have leprosy, well, they're going to start cutting off the evidence. So they're not allowed to do that. However, though, it says here, mitzvot milah pushes that off. So we said that the mitzvot milah pushes off cutting off the tzarat. Ben bizmana, ben shelo bizmana, which means, let's say there was a tzarat in the place of the brit milah. And you have this baby, and it has the tzarat there. Can you cut it off or not? Because one second, when you're cutting it off, you're cutting off the tzarat. So it says, Zalacha ben bizmana, ben shelo bizmana, right? Whether it's bizmana or not, which means the 8th day, or it's not the 8th day, whether it was, for example, that he was sick, or whether it was that it was a C-section and doesn't push off the Shabbat, right? So Yom Tov, eno doche, but it does not push off the Yom Tov, which means Brit Milah does not push off the Yom Tov and not the Shabbat. Ela bizmana bilvad, but only bizmana, which means we know the Brit Milah bizmana, which means Brit Milah in the proper time, the 8th day, pushes off the Shabbat and Yom Tov. But if it's not on the proper time, it does not push off the Shabbat and Yom Tov. And the same Tzarat, it does push off. So you're allowed to cut off the Tzarat, which is on the Brit Milah.
Sorry, Rav. Can we imagine that the baby has Tzarat?
Yeah. That's what we're saying here. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about baby.
How can he have Tzarat? Tzarat is from
the virus.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a virus. Tzarat is a virus. You're right.
Okay.
There's a hidden message behind Tzarat, which is Lashon Hara.
Yes.
But you should know that there's other things also kasher Tzarat. For example, meat and milk, right? Sorry. Not meat and milk. Meat and fish, right? Meat and fish, kasher Tzarat.
Okay, I didn't know. Okay.
There's a few things also. So again, you're right. What did the baby do? But it's like a type of a virus. It's a tzarat is also leprosy, which is like a type of a ego. It's a type of a tzarat that goes, a type of an infection, a type of thing that goes from one person to another. Okay, so the Gemara is going to ask, how do we know, how do we know that the mitzvah of milah, brit milah, pushes off the tzarat, ben bizmana, ben shelo bizmana? Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita, Yimol besar ulato. Remember, Kuf Lamed Bet Amud Bet, right? Yimol besar ulato, which means that you're going to cut off besar ulato is stam. Even though the person has there baheret yakutzi, you could cut it off. Mani mekayem. So what am I going to be mekayem? Hishamer benageh tzarat. You be careful from the tzarat. That means you're not allowed to cut off the tzarat. Hishar mekomot chutz milah. Every other place other than the brit milah, because brit milah you're supposed to cut it off. So says the Gemara, or maybe it's not like that. Maybe it's a filu milah. When do I say you're allowed to do brit milah if he doesn't have the tzarat there? But if he has the tzarat, you're not allowed to. Talmud Lomar comes to teach you besar or lato. The word besar is extra. Just say yimol or lato. Give a brit milah to his or la. Why did it say to besar or lato? To the flesh of his or la, to the foreskin. So he says, what is besar? Even though it has a baheret. Amar Rava says, at the beginning, what was good, and then what was the question? Like, what happened all of a sudden that he was saying it pashut, and all of a sudden he started asking, no, do we cut it off? Do we cut it off? What happened? What was the shakla v'tayah? What was the back and forth over here? So haki kama, this is what I'm saying. Imor besarulato, it's imor besarulato, v'avishim shamaheret, even though there's baheret there, mani mekayem. So what am I going to be mekayem shabbat negatzarat? B'shar mekomot in other places except for the milah. But the milah is doche the tzarat. My tama, what's reasoning? You can learn it from a kavachomer. Uma Shabbat chamura. If Shabbat, which is so chamur, Shabbat is one of the most strictest things in the Torah, and still brit milah is doche the Shabbat. Tzarat, which is lighter than Shabbat, lo kol sheken, wouldn't be a kol sheken that it should push it off. Which means if brit milah is so strict that it's going to push off Shabbat, which is the stronger, the most strictest, Kavachomer is going to push off the tzarat. So what is the eno or eno de kamar? So what does it mean now the opposite way? What happened now that he switched his mind? And he said, no, but maybe it's not like that. So he says, hada kamar. Then he said, 1 second. Whoever told you Shabbat is more strict. Maybe tzarat is chamira. Sheken dochet avodah, v'avodah dochet Shabbat. Tzarat pushes off the avodah in the Bet HaMikdash. And the avodah in the Bet HaMikdash pushes off the Shabbat. So therefore, who told you? Maybe tzarat is more stricter than Shabbat. Talmud Lomar comes to teach you, besar, the word, the extra, the superfluous word, besar, teaches you, even though it has bayeret. Lishna achrina, another version of this Gemara. Mila dochet tzara, mila pushes off the tzarat. My time, what's the reasoning? Because the positive commandment of the Brit Milah pushes off the negative commandment of taking off the tzarat. So my or eno de kamar. So what is the maybe it's not like that anymore. So hada kamar. Then he said no. Maybe I'm going to say dati yasev v'dachil lo taseh. Right? Maybe I'm going to say that only a positive commandment could push off a negative commandment. But he says lo taseh greida, but if it's only by itself. But this one is a mitzvat aseh and lo taseh. There's a positive and the negative commandment here. Why? Because it says shamer menega tzarat is a negative commandment. But then it says there v'la'asot kechol asher yiru otchem v'kohanim kashet tziritim, a positive commandment, which means that you have a positive and negative commandment in tzarat not to cut it off. So therefore, the Brit Milah, even though it's a positive commandment, the positive commandment cannot push off a positive and negative. It could only push off the negative by itself, but not a positive. So what am I going to do? Well, there's no beret. The word besar is extra, and even though it has beret, you're allowed to cut it off. So it's two versions of what was the back and forth. How do you call that? The Havamina, like, the beginning, the first mindset of the Gemara of what was the exact conversation going back and forth, the dialogue between, why would it be permitted or prohibited? Okay? So says the Gemara, Teinach Gadol, I understand by a Gadol of 13 years that it's going to push off the tzarat because it's written Besar. Katanami Besar. It's also written by a child Besar. Benoni Milanan. But how do we know that when you have a katan, which is after 8 days, right? That means because basically it wasn't in the proper time, whether the child was sick or whatever the circumstances it is, how do we know that also in such a case, it's also going to push off the cutting off the tzarat? Amar Abaye says, Atya mi benaya. It comes from the word benaya, benoni. What does that mean? Right? You learn from a tzada shaveh, meaning if I already know by an older person, by shlosha shanav yom echad, that it's going to push off the tzarat, okay, and I already know by a child, which is 8 days old also, because there it's written, that's talking about a gadol, that he's already, that means basically if a person becomes bar mitzvah, and he still doesn't have, right, the brit milah, he's mevatel the mitzvah, and therefore he's going to be chayav karet. So that's in right, varel zachar. Now the katan also it's written, right, besar, so therefore, since it's written besar by both of them, by a gadol and by a katan means an 8-day-old, so then I understand these halachot. But what about that if it's a 9-day-old, 10-day-old, or in between, basically, that's called a benoni. It's not a gadol, but it's not a katan. So Amar Abaye says, Ate mi benaya. We're going to learn it from a benoni. Right? Mi gadol lo atya. So he says, one thing, it's like a binyan av. Binyan av is we're going to put the two together. From a gadol, you can't learn it. Sheken anush karet. Because a gadol, he has an extra stringency. There's karet. Until a person doesn't become bar mitzvah, there's no karet if he doesn't have a brit milah. He can't learn it from a katan, sheken milah bizmana, because it says by milah bizmana, right? It's in the proper time. So what's the tzad shaveh sheben? What's the tzad sheken nimulin? That when you do the brit milah, they are obligated in the brit milah, and it pushes off the tzarat. So too, anybody that's obligated in the brit milah pushes off the tzarat. That's called a binyan av, which means that I can't learn it 100% from one because there's a stringency by one. I can't learn it from the other because it's stringency by other. But there's a common denominator between them. The tzad shaveh sheben is, common denominator is that when you do the brit milah, it pushes off tzarat. So to here, you push off the tzarat. Okay? So says the Gemara, Rava says, milah bizmana docha. The milah bizmana is going to be pushing off. Right? It's going to be pushing off. Lo tzrich hakra, you don't need a pasuk. You learn it from a kavachomen, which means milah in the proper time doesn't need a pasuk because you're going to learn it from a kavachomen. Uma Shabbat, just like by Shabbat, the chamira, that it's very chamur, docha, it's going to push it off. Tzara kol sheken, it means learn from a kavachomen. If it pushes off Shabbat, it's not going to push off the tzarat. Rava says the Safra Torah, how do you know Shabbat is more stricter? Maybe tzarat is more stricter. Sheken docha et avodah, but if tzarat pushes off the avodah, and the avodah pushes off the Shabbat, as we already said before previously. So says the Gemara, Hatam la mishum de chamira tzarat. It's not because it's chamira tzarat, ela mishum de gavra hu de lo chazi, but rather because the person is not fitting. So am I why? Yakutz v'artov yavot. Just cut off the bri milah, and then cut off the, not the bri milah, cut off the tzarat, and then just do the avodah. So it says, no mechusar tevilahu. Anyway, even if he would still do that, he would have to do tevilah. And then he has to wait until Herev Shemesh, until the nighttime, and then he's closer to bring the korbanot. So Teinach Negaim Tmeim, that's only if it's going to be a Nega Tameh, which means something which is 100% Tameh Tzarat. Negaim Teorim, what are you going to say if it's a Nega Taor? Remember that there does exist such a thing as a Nega Taor. And Ravashi, but Ravashi says, when do we say positive commandment pushes off the negative commandment? So he says, only by milah betzarat. Or tzitzit and kilayim. Tzitzit is a positive commandment, kilayim is a negative commandment. So he says, the beina de bitakar, lav, kamokin was when you're doing the negative commandment, you're fulfilling the positive. It's at the same second. When I'm cutting off the tzarat, I'm already doing the milah. It's at the same moment. Or when I'm putting on the tzitzit, even though I have the kilayim, which is shatnez, I already have the mitzvah tzitzit. So he says, avhacha, but in our case, right? Beina de mitaker lav, when you're going to be over on the lotase, lo kamokim say you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of bringing the korban, right? Because why? Because you're not allowed to do the avodah until afterwards, right? So therefore, it comes out that since it's not the exact same moment, you can't do that. You can't learn that I could push it off. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Had the Rav of Rav Safra. Look about Rav and Rav Safra. They were learning Mina Bizmanal, which is going to push off Tzarat from a Kav Chomer that is pushing off Shabbat, right? So Kufla Megimuna Amundale. So it says tonight here. It's actually Machlok Tanaim. The Tanya was we learned in a Braita. Besar. What does it mean? Besar. Ve'afal Pishi Sham Baheret. Even though there's going to be Baheret, Imol. You should push it. You should do the Brimila. Even Rabbi Yoshia. These are the words of Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonatan says. He says. Eno tzarich. You don't need to learn it from here. He says, why? Shabbat chamura docha tzarat lo koshken. If it's going to push off Shabbat, it's not going to push off Shabbat. So more and more says, besar afal pisham sheesham baheret imol. These are the words of Yoshia. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to explain. He says, you're right. The fact that it says besar, even though it has a baheret, you're going to do, right? You're going to do brimilad. These are the words of Rabbi Yoshia. So halam cry. Why do we need a pasuk? So davar she'enu mitkaven. It's davar she'enu mitkaven. Davar she'enu mitkaven mutar. And davar she'enu mitkaven is going to be mutar. So I'm right. So basically, that's the question. If davar she'enu mitkaven is going to be mutar, why do you need a pasuk? You're not having a kavanah to take off the tzarat. You only want to do a brim milah. Samar Abai said, "Lo nitzecha ela Rabbi Yehuda." We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda. Damar davar she'enu mitkaven asur. This is shitat Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'enu mitkaven is asur, which means even though you don't have kavanah to do the melacha, it's still going to be asur to do it. Another answer. Rava says, "Afilu tema Rabbi Shimon." Even if you want to say it's going to be Rabbi Shimon, or the Rabbi Shimon b'sik reisha velo yemut. What Rabbi Shimon does agree in b'sik reisha. Remember, b'sik reisha means if you're going to cut off the head of the turkey or the chicken, it's not going to die. It's obviously it's inevitable. Anything which is inevitable, it's not considered davar she'enu mitkaven. You don't have kavanah to do it, but it's like you have the kavanah to do it because if you're doing that, for sure it's going to happen. Abaye, and according to Abaye, what Lelez, he doesn't hold of this. We always say Abaye and Rava both said that Mod Rabbi Shimon b'sik reisha velo yemut. So says the Gemara, you're right. But at the Shama Mirava Svara, at the beginning, Abaye didn't hold of it. But after he heard it from Rava, that's when he agreed to Rava that right. And that's why we always bring down in the Gemarot. We brought it down a few times already. Rava and Abaye both said it's a psikash v'le'emut, Moder B'Shimon, psikash v'le'emut, you're going to be chayav. Ika dematla dahada Abaye v'Rava. Some people learn on this and Abaye v'Rava, aha on another things. Hishama minageh tzad lishma mob la'asot. You have to be careful not to cut off the tzarat. La'asot yata say. You don't do it in order to cut it off with your hands. Aval ata ata besiv shel geber reglo. But the Mitzurah is allowed to tie something around his leg, and he doesn't have to be careful not to do it too tight around the place where he has the tzarat. Or a mot that he has on top of his mot is like a stick that he has on top of his shoulders, right? That he doesn't have, maybe it's like taking off the place of the tzarat. Mavra, if it is that it did cut it off, avra, there's no avera. You did it, and that's it. So basically, you're not doing it intentionally, but if you put something around your legs, and right there you just had a tzarat, and now it comes off. So says the Gemara, lama likra. So why do we need a pasuk for that? So davar she'enu mitkaven is mutar. He says, why do you need a pasuk? Right? V'yishama nega tzara me'ol la'asot. La'asot you're not allowed to do, but if you do it, by the way, it's permitted. It's davar she'enu mitkaven. Amar Abaye lo nitzicha lo Rabbi Yehuda davar she'enu mitkaven. Usav Rav Amar afil to b'Shimon v'shom b'sik reisha v'lo yemut. So the Gemara says, Abaye doesn't hold of this svara of sikra shav lo yamut. Abaye v'Rav David Tov Omer shum sikra shav lo yamut. So answers the Gemara, the same answer that we said before, levatad Hashem and Rava svara. After you already heard it from Rava, he did agree with it. Okay? So again, Kufla Megimel Amud Aleph. So says the Gemara, Abaye, and according to Abaye, Aliba did Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, Hai Basar Ma'avile, what is it going to do with it? So he says, Amar Rav Amram, says Rav Amram, right? Be'omer lakus parto mitkaven. He says that he has kavanah to take off the tzarat, right? And still the Torah is teaching you that it's going to be permitted, right? Why? Because mitzvah milah is doche, the yisur of chitzat tzarat. Is doche, pushing off the cutting off of the tzarat. So says the Gemara, Teina Gadol v'Katan, this is Chazara, Mamash, we're just flying. Right? This is good for the Gadol and by the Katan. Remember, Gadol means above Bar Mitzvah, and by a Katan, which is exactly 8 days old. Why? Because over there, right, he has it's written Besar, right? But the Benoni, so Michael Meiman, Teina Gadol, right? Sorry, the opposite. By Gadol, right? So Michael, what are you going to say on that? Right? Why? Because the Katan, he doesn't know you have Kavanah. The exact opposite. Sorry, I apologize. It's the same that we said before, that it's written besar by both of them. However, though, he's just asking 1 second. If the kavanah is off the tzarat, what's the pshat over here? A gadol, he could have kavanah to take off his tzarat by doing the brimila. A katan has kavanah to take off the tzarat. So Amar Mishashi Omer Avia Ben, it's Avia Ben is saying it. He has kavanah to take it off, and it's still going to be permitted. So he says if there's somebody else that's not the father, let him do the brit milah. Why? Because the other person only has kavanah to do the mitzvah. He doesn't have kavanah to take off the tzarat from the child. Any place you find the positive and negative commandment, if you could fulfill both of them, it's better. And if not, then the positive pushes off the negative. Which means here you have the positive commandment, right, of the brit milah. Negative commandment of taking off the tzarat. So here, though, if you can fulfill both, fulfill both. If you can't, then okay, the positive pushes off the negative. So same thing. If there's somebody else that knows how to do brit milah, don't permit the father to do the negative commandment of taking off the tzarat, because he has kavanah for that. Let somebody else do it, and then you do both. Because even though the person's taking off the tzarat, he doesn't have kavanah for that. He does kavanah only for brit milah. So then it's perfect. So it says, there was nobody else to do the brit milah. Okay? Amar Mor says, Yom Tov ena docha. Milah does not push off Yom Tov, ela bizmana bilvad, also only bizmana. Meaning by Shabbat, we know it's only bizmana, but also by Yom Tov, it's only, how do we know this? Amar Chizkiah said, it says in Pasuk, you're not allowed to leave over from the Korban Pesach until the morning. And if you did leave it over, you have to burn it. What do you mean aboke? When it comes to teach aboke, we already know. It's a second morning, which means the Torah is teaching us that you don't burn on the 15th in the morning, but rather you wait until the next day, and then you give a second boken, and then you burn it. So Abaye says, Amar Kra, you already learned it. Olat Shabbat b'Shabbato, velo olat chol b'Shabbat, velo olat chol b'Yom Tov. Which means when it says here that only the Evarim of Olat Shabbat are able to be burnt on the Shabbat in itself, but not olat chol on Shabbat or olat chol on Yom Tov. Which means the Evret Tamid of the Erev Shabbat and Erev Yom Tov, they're not permitted to be brought on Shabbat and Yom Tov. You have to do it on the same day. So it comes out, Milah Shelo Bizmana is like an Ola of Chol, right? So therefore, you don't do it on Yom Tov. Rava comes and he gives a third explanation. Again, the first explanation was Otinimin Boker Sheni. So it comes to Tichu Boker Sheni. So therefore, he says, therefore it's going to be like Tzorche Chol. So Milah Shelo Bizmana is like Tzorche Chol. Second answer was the Lat Shabbat B'Shabbato. This is considered olat chol. Third explanation, Rav Amar, Amar says in Pasuk, Hu levado yeyaseh lachem. That only anything which is ochel nefesh you could do lachem. Hu velo machshinim. It's only going to be this and not the machshinim of ochel nefesh. Levado by itself, velo milah shelo bizmano that be kal vachomer. And not a milah which is not bizmano because you learn it from a kal vachomer. Ravashi comes and he says a fourth explanation. It's written on Yom Shmini Shabbaton. Shabbaton is a sehu, it's a positive commandment. You have to be shovet from the Melechet Yom Tov. So therefore, Yom Tov is a positive and a negative commandment. And the positive commandment of Milah Shelo Bizmana does not push off a positive and a negative. As you already said, a positive could push off a negative, but a positive cannot push off a positive and a negative. Okay? Fine. Says the two dots. Klal Amar Rabbi Akiva. Says Rabbi Akiva. Okay, there was a general rule that he said in order to argue on Rabbi Eliezer, any melacha that you could have done it before Shabbat is not pushing off the Shabbat. And any melacha that you couldn't have done it on Erev Shabbat, then it does push off the Shabbat. Amar Rav Yehuda says, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Amar Rav, right? Halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. So now we also learned about Pesach, the exact same halachot apply to Pesach. Klala, Rabbi Akiva says, the Rabbi Akiva Kelal, general rule, Kol melacha shefshal la'asot on Erev Shabbat, any melacha that you could have done on Erev Shabbat, right, for the Korban Pesach, and Dochat Shabbat is not going to push off the Shabbat. Shechita that you couldn't have done it Erev Shabbat, Dochat Shabbat is going to push off the Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it says, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, halacha, Rabbi Akiva, halacha, Zak Rabbi Akiva. Utzicha, we need both halachot, also by the Korban Pesach, and also by the Brit Milah. Why? If it only taught us by the Brit Milah, because there you could have done the machshidin from yesterday, so it doesn't push off the Shabbat. The leka karet, there's no karet, okay, which means that why? Because there's no onish of karet by pushing off the milah to the next day. Okay, but by Pesach there is a karet, which means that somebody that does not bring a korban Pesach, he's chayav mitat karet. So then I would say that you are going to that you should push off the Shabbat. Meaning by a Brit Milah, there's no karet. Remember, the karet only applies after 13 years old. It doesn't apply right away. So even if they did push it off, right? So why, it shouldn't push off the Shabbat. But here, if you push off the Korban Pesach, there is karet. And if it's something going to teach us Pesach, there's no 13 britot that were written in the Torah about it. By the Brit Milah, that it is written 13 britot by it, I would say that it's going to push off Shabbat. That's why I needed this general rule of Rabbi Akiva by both halachot, by Brit Milah and also by Korban Pesach. Mishnah, Uflamed Gimel Amud Aleph on the bottom. It says, Osin kol tzorchei milah b'Shabbat. You do all the tzorchei milah b'Shabbat. Mo'alin, you do Brit Milah, which is the milah. You cut off the orla, the foreskin. Porin, you do the priyah. Remember the priyah is you take with the two nails, right? That's why you have to leave it sharp, and you tear it. It's called priyah, and then you put it downwards. Okay? Notim alei yislanit, you're allowed to put on a bandage or plaster. Right, the kamun, you're allowed to put on a type of how do you call it, tavlinim, right, in order to do it for the fuah. I still remember until today there was a mohel that he came and he started putting on after the Brit Milah. He started putting on like this type of it looked like a spices. So she went and she said, it was right before the Brit Milah. So she went and the mother said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "No, I'm getting prepared the adafina, the chamin." So she didn't take it the best way, especially some mothers right before the Brit Milah, especially I think it was her first baby. They get very nervous. The Moed was trying to be funny that, lower the tension, calm down. He's not going to kill the child, you understand? But, the concept was that they actually put these type of spices and everything. Kamun is, kumen, right? They put it in order for the fuah, for the child, right? Then it says, im lo shachak, if they didn't grind it before Erev Shabbat, though, you're not allowed to grind it on Shabbat. It's tochen, you're not allowed to grind. Lo es b'shina, but what are you allowed to do? You could chew it with your teeth. Right? But that's like a shinui. It's like a difference, a change. And then you can put it on the bandage. You didn't put oil and wine on Erev Shabbat to mix them together, because they used to mix them together, right? And then they used to put it on the Brit Milah for refuah. Now on Shabbat, you're not allowed to mix them together, right? So he says over here, it's an Isur de Rabbanan, because it looks like you're putting it to cook. So it says, Yinaten ze be'atzmo v'ze be'atzmo, so put each one by itself, which means the wine by itself and the shemen by itself, without mixing them up. And then if they, right, each one, right, below le'arvam yadav, meaning you're not mixing them together. You put each one of them by itself, and then if they mix together, they mix them together. Okay, then you put it on the milah. You don't also make a chaluk, right? So the chaluk was like a type of a kiss, like a type of a thing, just for the brit milah, to cover it, just to make sure that, that nothing happens, it doesn't get infected or whatever it is. But you're allowed to be koreach alea smartut. You're allowed to put the smartut around it, right? If you didn't do it on Erev Shabbat, you put it on your finger, you bring it through the Reshut Rabim to the house of the child, and then you put it even from another chatzer, and then you put it on, right? But again, it's orche milah. Okay, fine. Kufla megima mubet, the Gemara. Michti katani kulhu. We just learned all of these halachot, and we said kol tzorche milah. If you just told me all the halachot, why does it say, by the way, you should know, you're allowed to do all tzorche milah b'Shabbat? And then it explained everything. So just tell me, you're allowed to do milah on Shabbat, priyah, metzitza. I skipped out the metzitza. I don't know why. Metzitza is the sucking of the blood. Remember that the moel has to come and he has to suck out the blood, because that's what starts the process of the healing, that he has to he has to suck it out. The truth is also a Kabbalah, a whole bunch of things there, but that's something else. Fine. So says the Gemara, we already learned Kol Tzorchei Milah, and then we learned all the halachot. What is it coming to include? So says the Gemara, it's coming to include that which the rabbis taught. Hamal, Kol Zman Shu Osek B'Milah, Ben Al Tzim Mekvin Et Milah, Ben Tzim Shemekvin Et Milah. He right? Basically this, if you were doing Milah on Shabbat, whether it's me'akev or not me'akev, sometimes there's tzitzin, which are small pieces of flesh. If there's still small pieces of flesh on the bri milah, whether it's me'akev or not me'akev, you're allowed to come and cut them on Shabbat. Why? Because you're still in the act of doing the bri milah. Piresh, the second that you take your hands away, on tzitzin mikvin to milah choser, on something which is me'akev the milah, you go back and you cut on Shabbat. But on something which is not me'akev the milah, you don't cut it then. You have to come back again tomorrow and you cut it the next day. Man Tana Piresh and Choser, who's the Tana that holds it? So the second that you separate it, you don't go back. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Mishom Beno Shel Yochanan Blokai, it's a Bishma Beno Shel Yochanan in the Tanya, as we learned. Arba Asar Shechal Yo b'Shabbat. If the 14th of Nisan falls out on Shabbat, I think that's this year, by the way. This coming Pesach, meaning of next year, yeah. This coming Pesach, somebody told me, I don't know. I think I would have to check again. Somebody told me it comes out on Motzei Shabbat. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, anyway, this one is not the exact same. This is coming on Shabbat itself. Okay? No. Sorry. I was correct. Arba Asar that came out on Shabbat, which means it comes out on Motzei Shabbat. So I don't know if there will be for this year. Let's see if I could see it very, very quickly. Because it's actually going to be a very interesting year. Because if we do that, always you have to remember about the Seudah Shalishit is always a big problem. It's how do you do the Seudah Shalishit for that? Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan. Yeah. Erev Pesach is Shabbat. So Pesach is Motzei Shabbat, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, you heard?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
So, okay, fine. Next, so it says over here, so again, one more time. Arba Asar Shechal Yo b'Shabbat. If the 14th fell out on Shabbat, which means again Motzei Shabbat is Pesach. Mafshit et Pesach ad Chazeh. You're allowed to skin the animal until the chest area in order to take out the emurim to bring them. But afterwards, you're not allowed to continue because you're not allowed to skin an animal on Shabbat. Even Rabbi Shimon, these words of Rabbi Shimon Chachamim say no. Mafshitin et kulo. You're allowed to do the entire thing. Why? According to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, he says that the reason why you're allowed to skin it until the thing is because once you finished it, it's considered that you separated from the afshata because you separated from the skinning in order to take out the things, right? And therefore, it's not going to be doche, the Shabbat, just like the Bri Milah. The second you separated, you're not allowed to come back and to do it. So says the Gemara Mimai. How do we know this? When did Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka say this only by over there? And because you don't need zeli gavel, which means when you skin an animal, you don't need to beautify the animal. There's no zeli vanvel. Here, by the Bri Milah, you do need zeli vanvel. So hachanami, so it should be permitted over here. Okay, the Tanya was learned in a Braita, right? Zeli vanvel. What does that mean? You should have to beautify yourself in mitzvot. What does that mean? When you make a sukkah, make a beautiful sukkah. When you make a lulav, a beautiful lulav. A shofar, a beautiful shofar. Tzitzit, beautiful tzitzit. Sefer Torah Na'ah, all these things. Uchtov bo lishmon, write it for us, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By the way, this is very, very important. Some people, they come and they'll spend fortunes on the best cars, on this, on that, on everything. And then it comes mitzvot and they look like a miskin. The guy is driving an Infiniti, a Volvo, a Mercedes, a Bentley, a Rolls Royce. And then the sukkah, you have one of these things that looks like a miskin. What's going on? Itnael lefanav b'mitzvot. Itnael lefanav b'mitzvot means his sukkah should be beautiful, right? You have that car, have a beautiful sukkah. You have lulav and etrog. Why is your lulav a miskin? Why does it look terrible? The etrog is the $25 etrogim that you buy in the thing. You should get an expensive etrog. You understand? It's a mitzvah. Hitnael lefanav b'mitzvot. Very, very important yesod. A lot of people, they don't realize that. They come and they say, Rabbi, this is my grandfather's feeling. I'm wearing them. I was going to say, it's probably already 100% pasul. Why is it? Do you have your grandfather's car? Why don't you drive your grandfather's car? Yeah, or go on the horse. Yeah? No. Why? Because you have to be in the inn. Exact same thing. Yeah? Check it. Make sure that it's beautiful. Make sure that it's nice. It's meudar. It's the best that it has. Very important. Okay? Sorry, that was the musar for today. Fine. Then it says, you have to write the Sefer Torah Lishmo, Bidyonah, with a beautiful, with the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the Shem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with a beautiful kurmus, right, which is basically the pen, a beautiful sofer uman, a beautiful sofer, a beautiful ink, and you do everything. That's why you're supposed to do it. Abashul says, what does it mean Anvehu? Anvehu is anivahu. What does it mean anivahu? Aved domelo, be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mahu charum v'rachum, so too you should be charum v'rachum. Right? So it comes out that there's a beautiful difference. What are you comparing Brit Milah to Brit Milah to Korban Pesach? Korban Pesach, when you're skinning an animal, there's no Zeli V'Mil. But Brit Milah, there is. So says the Gemara, Elam Ravashi, but rather Ravashi says, you're right. Hamani, who is this? Rabbi Yosef, it's Rabbi Yosef. It's not, because we know into the Mishnah, Ben Shenira Ba'alil. Whether it is that it's going to be in a Tzura Brura, Guruya, that means something you could see it, or it's not Nira Ba'alil, Mechalin Shabbat. Which means, here we're talking about a Masechet Roshana Kiddush HaChodesh, which means you see the new moon. So you're allowed to be Mechalil the Shabbat in order to come testify about the new moon. Okay, so it says whether you see it or you don't see it, which means whether you could see it perfectly or not. What does that mean? Rabbi Yosef Omer, Im Nira Ba'alil, you're not going to be Mechalil Shabbat. Why? Because even though there's a mitzvah to testify, it's not Doche the Shabbat, because it's not Tzorah Kavua. Why? Because for sure other people saw it, and they're going to come and testify. If everybody could see it, so you don't have the mitzvah to come testify, but for sure somebody else is going to come and testify. So says the Gemara, Mimai, how told you that? Maybe Rabbi Yosef only said it over there, Mishum Delon Nitera Shabbat Lidchobas. Basically, you're not supposed to push off the Shabbat. Aval Hacha, but over here, you're allowed to push off the Shabbat for the Brit Milah. You're allowed to do it. Hachanami. Elamir Nadai, you're right. Says Rabbi Nadai, it's Rabbanan of Rabbi Yosef. The Tram is learned in the Mishnah Menachot. This is talking about putting the lechem apanim on Shabbat. Arba kohanim nichnasim. There were 4 kohanim that used to come in. Shnayim biadam shne starim. 2 of them had 2 starim. Ushnayim biadam shne bazichim. 2 of them had the 2 bazichim. The bazichim was the frankincense, the palas. How do you call it? The shovels, right? That they used to put it. Right? Sorry, 1 second. So basically, the halacha says, the Gemara is saying over here that there are 4 kohanim coming in, 2 with the 2 starim of the 6 breads, and 2 with the bazichim. So what happens now? Right? It says over here, Shnayim biyadam shne bazichim varba'a. Right? There's going to be varba'a kohanim acharim, another 4 kohanim, them come in, 2 of them to take the 2 starim of bread, and 2 of them to take the 2 bazichim that were already there. Hamachnisim, the ones that come in, right, to bring in the new things, they stand on the north. Okay? Upneim ladarom, and they're facing the south. Let me just see if we have a picture of this. No, chaval. Okay, so basically they would come into. Remember, you're coming into the Bet HaMikdash. Remember, into the Hechal. Okay, you come into the Hechal, the Ulam, and then the Hechal. When you're coming in, right? Remember that over here in the west is the Kodesh HaKodashim in the west. So when they used to come in, they used to go to the north. Okay, they used to be in the north and face to the south. Okay, then what happens? Hamotzim odnim b'darom, and so on. The other ones were the other way around. So elu moshkim, these ones they take out the bread, and these ones are putting in the bread. So they're taking out, the other ones are already putting in the bread. Right? Elu moshkim, elu manichim, v'tivcho shel zeh, right? Betzad tivcho shel zeh. So each one, their hands are there. So therefore, there's not 1 second that there's no bread, because when they're already coming out, they're already coming in. So their hands are like touching each other. So they're always there. It says in the pasuk, lefanai tamid, that the shulchan should always have the lechem apanim there. Rabbi Yosef says, even if it's going to be that one are taking and the other ones are putting in, and it's not mamash 1 second in with the same second, it's still going to be the same thing. There's no problem whatsoever. So you see from here that according to Chachamim, if they're going to take it off and they're putting it back, it's not considered tamid, because it's like a new start. So you see from here, the one that says that the second that the mohel takes off his hands, it's considered a new start, and therefore it's not good. We learned in the Braita. So it says if there's going to be after the bri milah tzitzin, which are me'akev, you're allowed to cut it. And if you didn't cut it off, anush karet, there's going to be karet. Who is this? Mani, who is this? That says that there's karet, even for the tzitzin, which are me'akvim et hamilah. Remember this little pieces of skin. Rav Kana says it's uman. The mohel is anush karet, right? That if he does it and he doesn't finish the bri milah. So matkif Rav Papa says uman. Lemele ani avdai, ani avadi palga de mitzvah. He could say no. The mohel could say very simple. 1 second, I did half the mitzvah. Now you do another half of the mitzvah. What's going on here? Why should he get the karet? And Rav Papa says, no, you're right. We're talking about a katan. We're not talking about a katan anymore. We're talking about a gadol shenimol. And therefore, right, it says, since the gadol is shenimol, he's already chayav mitzvot, so he says it's going to be anush karet. That means if they didn't finish the mitzvah of milah, he's going to get the karet. So matkif la Ravashi asks, gadol behediak, it's written, varel zachar, ashelimol, for sure he's going to get karet. So everyone knows that. So Ravashi, but rather Ravashi said, no, le'olam uman, you're right. It is the mohel. He came on Ben HaShoshot the Shabbat. And they said, what, lo mispakta? What, you didn't have the time to finish the bri milah during the day? He says, Maspika, I did have enough time. But he did do the bri milah and he didn't have enough time. So he made a chabura on Shabbat, and therefore he's going to get karet. Which means he came mamash erev Shabbat with Ben HaShoshot, and they said, yeah, but you came too late to do the bri milah. Says, don't worry, smoch alai, leave it to Beaver, don't worry. I'm going to do it. He does it. And what happened is that he lost out. Why did he lose out? Because Bemet, it was a problem of karet. Fine, motzitzin, right? We're by the 2 dots on the bottom. We're almost finished. Motzitzin, to do metzitza. Amar Rav Papa says, Hayumana de lo ma'itz, sakanahu. If you have a mohel that he doesn't do metzitza, it's a sakana, and we take him off. We don't let him be a mohel. So it says in Rapshita, obviously, obviously, if you're allowed to be mechalel Shabbat to do metzitza, obviously it's a sakana, right? But that was one of the things that we learned in the Mishnah. You're allowed to do metzitza. So it says, no. I would have thought to say, Haidam mifkapaki, that this blood is just there. Kamashmanan comes teach you know that it's chabura mechbar, that you're actually mamash taking out the blood from the chabura. It's not just that the blood was there and you pop a hole and the blood comes out. You're actually taking it out. The dumya displanim kamun, so it's like the displanim kamun, just like the displanim kamun. If you didn't do it, it's a sakana. Right? So too here, if you didn't do it, it's going to be a sakana. So too by the metzitza, if you don't do it, it's a sakana. Next 2 dots, so then you're allowed to put a bandage. Rabbi says, my mother said, Isplanita de kulu kebe. The isplanita helps for all types of things. Shev minai tarba v'chada kira. 7 manot of chelev and 1 manah of shava. Right? What does that mean? That means the best isplanita is you're going to have 7 types of chelev and 1 of wax. Rava says you have to have kira v'kilba, shava v'saf etz. That's what you have to have in the splanit. Fine. The Rashad Rava Mechuza, Rava came and explained Mechuza, Karinu b'nei Yom Manaihu, right? Karu b'nei Yom Rofei, they went, they tore their clothing. Why? Because Rava went and they basically, the second that they gave over all the secrets of bandages, right? They tore their clothing because now the Rofim had no money. Imagine right now you're going to come and you're going to give Dr. Google is going to give all the medicines to everybody. All the doctors are going to lose all their money. Right? They're going to lose their parnasah. So Rava came and he told him, right? He says, he says, what is that? Something that washes his face and he doesn't actually dry it very, very well. The first line is his face. He gets a lot of, acne and all these things. What does he do? Right? He has to wash his face in water of selek, in beet water. And that he didn't come and he didn't teach it publicly, even though we just taught it right now publicly. But it says, but he didn't teach it publicly. So he said, don't worry, you still have parnasah. You're still going to have some things that they're going to come to you. We finish on the top of the 2 lines on Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph.